That night, nothing had happened, and we'd been on pretty much a ready alert status for weeks on end because they had constant strikes going over. In fact, just to digress, we could, in some of the strikes when we were flying there, you could watch the aircraft, if they were in close enough to the coast, you could watch them make their bombing runs and see the puffs of smoke coming up and that. But so this night we were sitting around and everybody's relaxing, and I'd watched some forgettable movie in the wardroom, and about 11 o'clock I had gone to bed, and everybody's in there, and I was in bed just about half an hour, 40 minutes, something like that, and all of a sudden, SAR alert, bong, bong, bong. And so jumped out of the rack, got into my flight suit, and ran aft to the flight deck. And my pilot, Clyde Lassen, his job was then to go to CIC, the Combat Information Center, to get a briefing on what this was all about. And my job was to get the aircraft, the engine started, and get everything up to releasing the rotor brake. And so that's where we were, and he came back, jumped in the aircraft, and now this is midnight, and like I say, we aren't flying at night too often, and there was no moon. It was a black night, which made, and the significance of that for helicopter pilots and any pilot is that there's no horizon. And without a horizon, you are totally dependent on the gauges. And now here we are, we're taking off of a ship that's probably where the flight deck was about 8 feet above the water, maybe 10. And the other thing about it is this was a single engine H2. They've right after this, they went to adding a second engine. But the single engine H2 was very underpowered in that high humidity of the Tonkin Gulf. And on a normal day, we would sometimes take off, leave one crewman on the deck, take off and get into the air, limp into the air, which usually meant diving down towards the water to get about 5 feet of it so that you could get what is called ground effect, but over the water, and suppose they'd call it water effect, but the rotor system is pushing down on the waves that gives it a little more efficiency, and the aerodynamics of the fuselage, once you get enough speed, the fuselage itself will provide a little bit of lift, of residual lift. But we would have to take off, go dump fuel of at least 200 or 300 pounds, which is the weight of one of our crewmen, and then come back and land and pick up the second crewman. So that was what we were taking off with on that dark night, except we had both crewmen on board and a little cooler. But again, we dove towards the water on instruments from 8 feet, and then got airborne and went up. And so then Clyde gave us a briefing that said that there had been a aircraft shot down about 15, 20 miles inland from the coast. They thought the pilots were still successfully evading, that they hadn't been discovered yet because it was late at night and everybody was sleeping. And so he said, well, we'll just go up, and we have to sit and wait to see if we're told to go in or not. And we agreed we would not be told to go in. Nobody had ever done it before. There wasn't enough time to organize any sort of a close air support at this point. The Jolly Green from the Air Force, their way of doing it, they went in, just bombed the heck out of everything around, and they did a lot of close ground support. And we in the Navy had not done too many inland rescues. A few had been done from my squadron. So we said, we're not going in. We'll sit up here for half an hour and they'll call us back. Our biggest problem is how we're going to get back on board without crashing this thing. Well, they pulled the rug out from under us. They said, yep, your signal is Charlie, you can go. Now, in order to get approval, and there was a person called Harbor Master, that was their call sign, I forget what the CTF designation was, but they were sitting down there, and their staff was assessing everything, and there were several things that had to take place. One, they had to have positive contact with the survivor. They had to have, the survivor had to be successfully evading capture, and in that, and they had to authenticate their validity of who they were. And that was done, everybody, when they went over, had a sheet of paper to fill out, a form that they gave answers to. What's your favorite color? What's your favorite ice cream? What's your mother's maiden name? You know, those kind of questions that only they would know the answers to. And so we said, that's not going to happen. But then again, they did. Now, where we were at the time was right at off the coast of, almost parallel to Vinh, maybe a little bit north of it. And Vinh was noted for having the most anti-aircraft missile defense systems around. They just, when you looked at a map of North Vietnam and the little red dots showed where the anti-aircraft was, Vinh was almost all red. There was just everything there. So we had a rescue combat air patrol who was giving us vectors and steers overhead. We had a manned air traffic controller on board the ship who had taken the Mayday call from the F-4 crew. The F-4 crews was John Holtzclaw and John Burns. Zeke Burns and Claw were their nicknames. And they had been on a mission where they were looking for some what they called movers, any trucks or anything going along. They had a flight of 3 aircraft, 2 F-4s and an A-6. And they had their procedures for going. Well, what happened is that the F-4, root beer was the call sign, got locked on by a surface-to-air missile. And they evaded the first one, they evaded the second one, and in order to evade these two, it was jinking and zigging, and they were moving back and forth. Well, by the time the third one came up, they had lost their airspeed, they'd lost their altitude, they'd run out of everything but ideas, and it hit the wing, and they managed to eject and come down over this rice paddy and get back together, and then made their way up a small mountainside, which is an outcropping of rock. And first time I heard the term karst, but that's the geological name for it. So they were down, and this rice paddy surrounded by a bunch of villages, and successfully evading. They hadn't been captured yet, but people were looking for them because now they had awakened the neighborhood. And so when we went in, we went up just north of Vinh and turned up this little valley. Now, it's not like we were flying down the valley. We were at about, what are we going at? I think at about 3,000 feet, which was outside of the small arms fire in case there, but that put you right up in the range for anti-aircraft. And it was we could see the F-4 burning up at about our 10 o'clock position, probably 15 miles away. And it's a big, bright glow in that. Now, the only way that we could find people on the ground is we had very rudimentary instruments for detecting people. Every pilot on the ground, every pilot who flew, in case he had to go on the ground, had his own personal survival radio with a little walkie-talkie, but it would broadcast in 3 or 4 frequencies, and it also had a steady tone that just sent out this ear-piercing boom, boom, boom. And if they talked, and we were on that frequency, then we had an instrument in the cockpit that a needle would point and say that's where the signal's coming from, and that's all we could get. So, as we turned up the north and got a steer from Rescap flying overhead, and it had to be his wingmen. So at that time, the wingmen usually became Rescap, the Rescue Combat Patrol, to give us the vectors and the steers to where their last known sighting was, where they went down. And about that time, we were flying in maybe 100 knots, 110 at the most probably, because H-2 wouldn't go too much faster. And all of a sudden I heard this loud whoosh and saw this trail of sparks go by the left-hand side of the aircraft, which was my side, and that was missile number 1 that was shot at us. And it missed, fortunately. And we've continued on up and said, well, they didn't hit us that time. If they hit us, we won't It won't hurt.
Did you have any way of seeing these SAMs?
Oh, no. No. See, in the F-4s and the other aircraft, they had detection equipment that they would know when they were getting locked on. In fact, Zeke Burns, who was the radar intercept officer sitting in the back seat, and Holtzclaw was the pilot in the F-4. When they made a first pass over, they instantly knew that there was somebody down there who was locking on. There was a SAM site that was locking on him. And Zeke, I've seen him and talked with him many times in the years since, and he said, you know, he made the statement to Claw, he said, that guy's pretty hot stuff. And the reason that he said that was not that the system, the SAM site was hot stuff, but the operator was, because he said he's probably a Russian instructor or somebody, because usually you get vip, 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 you know, the sound in your earphones in the headphones that indicate you've been locked on, or that they're searching for you, rather. And then when it goes to a lock on, vip, 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 it comes up. He said he took one sweep and he was a lock on. And this guy was good down there. So, but we in the helicopter didn't have anything like that. We had flight instruments. We had airspeed indicator and altimeters and stuff like that. There was no anti-missile defense. We continued to fly up, and we kept trying to get a fix on where they were, where the survivors, where Zeke and Claw were. And by the way, I should say my crewmen were Don West, who was a third-class jet mechanic, and Bruce Dallas, who was a second-class electrician at that time, and sitting in the back. So